Just a reminder, you can catch me recording this podcast live on AMP. AMP is a new live radio app that lets you call in and chat with me in person while recording. Get the app on Apple's App Store and make sure you follow me at John Middlekauff to get notified when I go live. What is going on, everybody? John Middlekauff Go Low podcast coming at you after the U.S. Open. It literally just finished. Wyndham Clark is your champion, but Rory McIlroy might be the lead story. We'll dive into it all. Subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. If you're watching this on YouTube, smash that like button. Subscribe to the page. Leave a comment. Looking at this hat, go to thevolume.com. Check out the Go Low merch. Get yourself a trucker hat. We got polos as well, thevolume.com. If you use a promo code OPEN23, you'll still get a little discount. And, lot coming up on today and really this weekend's action. A lot of buzz about the broadcast partners and as well as the course / LA Country Club and the ticket situation. We will dive into it all. But first, you want to go to one of these events? Obviously, at the U.S. Open, they didn't have many tickets. You want to go to a baseball game? Football's right around the corner coming up this fall. Concerts, comedy shows, you name it. Here's what you do. You go to your smartphone, you download the Gametime app, and you use the promo code GOLOW, GOLOW, and you get $20 off. Get yourself a pair of tickets to any event, comedy, concerts as well. Promo code GOLOW, official ticketing app of this podcast. Love my friends at Gametime. Wyndham Clark is the champion, and we will dive into him. An incredible story. Awesome win. Dude's a stud. I mean, he's established himself now as not just a lock Ryder Cupper for the U.S., but just one of the better U.S. players right now, right? Scotty's clearly the best. I would put Brooks right up there. DJ showing signs of life. We got a lot of question marks with our core guys, and Wyndham Clark wins a month ago at an elevated event and then wins the U.S. Open. So, dude bombs it. He can work it both ways. That power cut, stud. We'll dive into him in a second because that was a cool win. I do think the story of the day is Rory McIlroy. This is basically his second major in the last four where it felt like he should be the champion if he makes a putt. And he just cannot make a putt. Now, there's a difference in not winning, I think, and choking. He did not choke today. He shot even par. So did Wyndham Clark. So did Scotty Scheffler. He played fine. He was peppering greens. But one thing, he wasn't hitting it that close. And like on 18, I've never played on the PGA Tour, but it's pretty clear you got to be able to work the ball both ways. But mainly, especially with shorter irons, I would say from 150 to 200, play a little butter cut. It's something that it feels like Rory struggles with, right? Like, it can't be argued. I will not hear the argument that he's not an all-time great talent. He's an all-time great player when you factor in the majors and when you factor in the winning on the PGA Tour. But as of the last couple years, it's very, very difficult. The thing that makes golf different than a lot of sports, right? In basketball, the Miami Heat lost to the Denver Nuggets, right? In football, the 49ers lost to the Eagles. The Bengals lost to the Chiefs. So they finished, technically like third and fourth in the NFL. That sucks. Obviously, it's better than being the Chicago Bears, but it does not feel good for those teams. Just like in golf, if you're Rory McIlroy, it doesn't feel good, even though he beat the entire field except Wyndham Clark. He had a very, very successful week, just like he did at the Open last year at St. Andrews. But for him, the standard is much higher. Right? Like Steph Curry, LeBron, like now the Chiefs, like Alabama football. You could argue Georgia football now. It feels like it's win or go home. You're not getting brownie points for second. This isn't about the money. He's got an unlimited amount. And he's just a guy who feels like he can't make a putt on Sunday. Now, I would say the last year, he's had some Sundays that just didn't look right. I thought he was relatively fine today. He just can't make a putt. And it's one thing, listen, anyone that's played golf, sometimes you're lipping out, you're leaving it a little short. It happens. I thought, especially the front nine, he wasn't even close. His putts never felt like they had a chance. You watch Scotty today, who's having a really rough season putting. He had a ton of putts where they ended up not going in, but you felt like within a couple feet of the cup, it was going to fall. And that was not the case with a lot of Rory's putts. It just wasn't. Now, he hit a couple wayward drives late, on 17, got a little lucky, went into the number 2 fairway. But like the driving with Rory McIlroy is the least of his worries. It's one of the greatest attributes in the history of golf. It's pretty clear if he's ever going to get if he just made some putts, he would have 6 majors right now. He would have won the Open and he would have won today. Well, what was the difference in both of those? Wyndham Clark came through, made some big putts. Obviously, his short game was incredible. And obviously at the Open, Cam Smith, like today, can't miss. Cam Smith makes everything when he has to. Rory McIlroy's the opposite. And if you just keep putting yourself in these positions, are you bound to win? Because ultimately now Rory, for the next several years, it's 4 times a year. He can win regular tournaments. He can win the FedEx Cup. No one cares. It does not matter. He's only going to be judged, and this is like a lot of NBA players. It's like, do you win it all? Do you win a major, right? And right now it feels like, but it's hard to have faith in him because it does not feel like the putts are going to fall. It just doesn't. And I'm telling you, I don't feel like he can hit the little butter cut when he has to. And I would say the butter cut in these big tournaments, 1, it holds a lot of these greens, and 2, in some of these pins, it gets you a lot closer. And he really struggles with it. He does, because he's a natural drawer of the golf ball. But a lot of guys that do that, like you watch Scotty Scheffler on 18. Now, obviously, Scotty couldn't win it, right? He was technically out of it at the time, unless Wyndham Clark had an all-time disaster and Rory shanked it over the green. But he played a beautiful little low cut into the green, played it to the back, and it rolled down the hill, and he had a really good look at birdie. Rory, meanwhile, pulls a fucking 8-iron, and he's 45 feet away. It's like that just can't happen. Now, before we could get to the 18th hole, but it was all the putts all day that never really had a chance. And honestly, he got a little lucky. Wyndham missed a couple short putts and got, I don't want to say screwed, but, on hole 8, he hit a pretty unreal second shot. And there's that crazy drop off of the green. And he ended up going into, the Barranca deep in the rough. And it took him a couple shots to get out. And he still made an incredible bogey. If he just lands on the green 2 putts, he kind of easily wins this tournament. But it does feel, and a lot of people in my mentions, in my DMs, are just, I don't want to say crush Rory, but it feels like he's not going to get it done. And it's hard to argue with that. I didn't have much faith coming in today. I didn't have much faith coming into the week. He actually made it closer than I thought. But today was, and I was rooting for him once it was clear Rickie was out of it. But he just, I don't know. He just can't get it done right now in these big tournaments on Sunday for whatever reason. I'm not counting the FedEx Cup last year against Scotty Scheffler. It's about the majors for this guy who, had a chance, and I guess technically still does, to be like an 8-9 major guy. It feels like it's going to be very, very difficult for him just to eventually ever win his 5th. I mean, we're talking about a decade gap now. And you look at these guys, like Wyndham Clark played better than he did today. He just did. I don't see how anyone could argue that as you watch today, especially after a couple holes, it was like Wyndham Clark looks better right now than Rory, right? He hits it just as far as he does. He can, that butter cut really, really matters. It matters in these big tournaments. And I know a lot of people are saying this is a draw course. And obviously there are shots that force you to hit a draw either off the tee or in your second shot, depending on where they have the tee. But when the fairways are rock hard, when the greens are rock hard, the butter cut lands a little softer. And Wyndham Clark was awesome. He lives here in Scottsdale. He's, one of those guys, a little Max Homa-y in terms of clearly had fallen on some rough times a couple years ago, battled back mentally is his downfall because you watch the power in which he has, the touch in which he has. He's really good around the greens. And today he was just very under control. And listen, I mean, he hit the farthest drive of the day on 17, 350 yards. I had the shot tracer on 18 for him. I don't know what was going on. It looked like it was going to the Pacific Ocean, and all of a sudden it landed in the fairway. Now that is the biggest fairway on the course, but just an incredible moment. It's always really cool I think most of us, none of my guys were going to make money unless Cam Smith had an incredible, to rattle off 8 birdies a day and somehow win the tournament. But I think most of us were either rooting for Rickie or Rory. And kind of rooting against Wyndham, even though how do you root against a guy that lost his mom in college, who thought about quitting the game, who's fallen on rough times, and who's battled back to become, like I said earlier, one of the best U.S. players and just bombs the ball? I mean, absolutely mashes it. Had a couple times a day where most of us, anyone, I don't care if you shoot 72 or you shoot 100. When you're playing well and you're in a money game or you're in a big, in a big match against a buddy and all of a sudden it starts unraveling, it can be lonely out there. And I can't even imagine the U.S. Open. He had a couple of moments a day where it felt like, on 17 when he hits it in the bunker and he has to basically hit a lob wedge out. You're like, God, he's going to bogey this hole. And what does he do? He knocks a wedge 5 feet and makes the putt. And, that turned out to kind of be the difference, right? If you factor in the last couple holes where Rory could have come back. But it's always cool to see a first-time major winner. We've had, obviously, a ton over the years. This one feels like this guy, if he keeps playing like this, is going to be a factor for a while, right? It's not like he just had some insanely hot putting, weekend or day. This is a guy that won a month ago at the Wells Fargo, who just pounds the ball, who was just a fucking ball striker. And to me, what really struck or stood out watching him play is some guys that are just really, really long. They kind of lack touch. This guy, I felt very confident the more you watched him around the greens. Like, this was not fluky. I'm not saying this guy's going to rattle off 3 or 4 more majors, but I expect him, unless something dramatic happens or he has an injury, to be a major factor on the PGA Tour for a while, because that game translates, right? And it really does. So congrats to him. That was fun to watch. What wasn't fun to watch is, I don't want to say the guy choked, because he's had a fantastic season. He's resurrected his career. I have a lot of respect. It would have been really, really easy. And I think Rickie falls under a category with Justin Rose, with Jason Day, a bunch of guys that have won this year, older guys. Rickie's a little younger, obviously, than Justin Rose, but, somewhat similar age to Jason Day. I think he's a couple years younger than him, to take the live money. And all of them had, especially Justin Rose or Jason Day and Rickie, kind of fallen on hard times as a player, super famous guys. Rickie is one of the more popular players on tour. It felt inevitable. I don't know the guy personally, but it's like, Rickie, he's going to end up at Live. And not only did he not go to Live, remember the big meeting they had, I forget where, but he flew with Tiger Woods to the meeting. Maybe it was in Boston. And it was like, God, Rickie's in it to win it here. And the guy saw some ugly parts of professional golf, right? I mean, he was one of the best players on the PGA Tour 7-8 years ago. He's finished in the top 3 of every major. He easily could have won majors in his younger years on tour. He's clearly one of the more popular / marketable players on the PGA Tour. And he just battled. And he was shooting 60 or 62 on Thursday, which was pretty incredible start. But you watch coming into today, like, it was hard. I did not envision him shooting 75. I wasn't confident he was going to win. I thought Rory McIlroy was going to win, but I didn't see a 75 coming. And he clearly did not have his A game. He was all over the map, and it was a rough watch. It really was. He ended up, finishing right next to guys like Tommy Fleetwood. And it was tough, man, because I think Rickie Fowler is a really, really easy guy to root for. You say a lot. You never really know these guys. Happy Father's Day to everyone out there. For those of you with young children, it's like, do I really want my son to look up to said professional athlete? You don't actually know what they're doing behind closed doors. We've been let down so many times over the years. There was that visual last night on Saturday of Rickie, who was tied for the lead. It's not essential. It's close to his hometown. I mean, I Southern California, I put under an umbrella. It was a home game for Rickie Fowler, and he was signing autographs well into the pitch dark for little kids. And that's always been something. I have no personal interactions with Phil beside like seeing him at golf tournaments, but a lot of people over the years have said it can be a little fake, some of his things. No one's ever said that about Rickie Fowler. So I think he is a very, very easy guy to root for just from a golfing standpoint. And then when you factor in the variables of him not even being in the U.S. Open last year, he was an alternate, the first alternate in, and he ended up not getting in. He was a guy that was struggling to be, like, was this going to be a top 100 player? Was this guy going to keep his PGA Tour card? Clearly, he was going to have access because of career money, career money, career earnings. Can't even speak. I'm so worked up. But yeah, 75. That was rough. It really was. 62, 68, 70, 75. He's can't feel good. Can't at all. Some other thing working down the leaderboard, it's pretty crazy. Scottie Scheffler's floor. His floor is just incredibly high. He was, I said it coming in, him or Brooks, you had to put money on. I couldn't blame anyone that did. And Scottie Scheffler, he couldn't have really won today, but it felt like, Koepka was a disaster and finished 18th. This was a Scottie Scheffler, didn't have his A game and finished third. He's really good, man. I think him and Cam Smith, and this is where Liv comes into play. The PGA Tour misses Cam Smith. That guy is one of the greatest putters we've ever seen. His look, the hair flowing out of the back of the hat. He's just a fun player to watch. He's a fun player to gamble on because at any moment he can rattle off 5 straight birdies. And he's somehow, you look up, he finished 4th. It's just, I had a heavy bet on him to win, but I never totally felt out of it because at any single moment, the guy can just make 6 or 7 birdies. His putting is just awesome. Tommy Fleetwood and Rickie Fowler finished tied for 5th. That's pretty nuts. Obviously, Fleetwood shot 63 today, hair flowing, ball striking Jesse. I thought this tournament was fun. Now let's dive into a couple things not regarding the actual play. I think 2 of the main subjects are, let's start with the course. And I said this last week, I'm probably the poorest individual that's ever played LACC. This course, having just been there, I played several, I guess not several, but I've played Olympic Club, for example, which has hosted several U.S. Opens. I went to my first ever golf tournament in 1998. I think they hosted again in 2028. Olympic Club is a much bigger property than LACC. And like LACC, it's less exclusive. They have more members, but just in terms of its exclusivity, it's a pretty exclusive golf course. Like not everyone just gets to play it, right? It's harder to get on LACC, but in terms of fans, it is much more equipped to handle a lot of people. Los Angeles Country Club is just not. Now, some of the information coming out, because a lot of people were talking shit going, where are the fans? Well, anyone who's been to Southern California, the traffic is atrocious. And the number one thing anyone thinks about when they're in Los Angeles is, how do I get out of here, right? How do I beat traffic? And I think a lot of times you looked up Friday or Saturday and the stands weren't completely full. And I just thought, well, I bet people are trying to beat the traffic, which is crazy. It's a big event, but just a reality of the area. It turns out on a daily basis, they give 23,000 tickets, and 15 of them are for basically VIPs. And then there are 9,000 for general admissions. But rumors were floating that the country club bought 4,500 of those. So there are actually only 4,500 GA tickets available. And my first thought is, like, not totally surprised. I'm really not. You think the elites at LA Country Club want the poors on their property? They just don't. And a lot of people I saw on social media streets were going, why? I don't care how exclusive you are. And Augusta is a good example. One of the most exclusive clubs in the world. And they take a lot of pride in the patrons, right? And there's a lot of them there. And when you watch the Masters, it feels jam-packed. Well, when you're watching this tournament, like, where the fuck are all the people? This was an elite event. This, to me, kind of symbolized, I would just say, California. Elites talk a big game. They actually don't want to interact with those people. They tweet about it. They Facebook post about it, but they don't actually want them around their shit. And I've defended LACC a little bit. It just is not equipped to handle that many people. Now, ultimately, I think that I think the U.S. Open is better off going to courses like this, that overwhelming majority of us that play golf will never see. And there are a ton of other courses, whether it's a Pine Valley or a Cypress. If you could ever hold a sweet event there, you should do it. I don't care if there are 15 people on the property. And a lot of the players, Matt Fitzpatrick, defending champion, was talking a bunch of shit. Hovland, Koepka. And I think a lot of it stems from lack of people, lack of buzz. These guys are used to now at this, time for the sport, playing in some venues with a lot of people buzzing. And that wasn't the case. This was a rich event. That's what it felt like. And the problem is this is the U.S. Open, where really any single human with a low handicap can qualify. It's why so many guys, that the longest day in golf is at 36 holes. And for every Sergio Garcia that qualifies in, some random guys that you've never heard of also do that. And I think it's tough. I don't really mind it, but I understand the pushback. But I'm not stunned at all. If you thought LACC was going to let every Tom, Dick, and Harry come onto their property, you got another thing coming. This was never going to happen. So when I saw the line that they bought half the GA tickets every day, I was like, of course they did. But, it is what it is. And I find it kind of funny, but I understand people that are worked up about it. The one thing I am worked up about it, the broadcast was atrocious. That is one of the worst 4-day broadcasts in the history of sports television. NBC, a couple years ago, Fox wanted out of the golf game. And they had paid basically $100 million for every U.S. Open. And they sold it to NBC for reportedly about $40 million. So NBC paid 40 cents on the dollar for this property. Yet when you watched it, it felt cheaply done. I don't know this for a fact. Someone tweeted this at me, but it does make sense. That buzz we heard all week long was a plane flying over. Instead of getting the blimp, which, according to social media, could be wrong. Don't fact check me on this, but it does make sense. It's pretty expensive. Well, you can do your own plane for much cheaper to get some aerial shots. And the plane was going in circles. Well, it makes sense because that's all we heard all week long, the buzzing. And then half the time, if you watch, especially before the leaders teed off, they would not have shot tracers. This is the U.S. Open. This isn't the Yeti Classic or the Rainbow Sandal Invitational. This is the U.S. Open at LACC. And you're going cheap when you bought it for cheap? I just do not understand it. Now, I'm a capitalist, and anyone that listens to my podcast knows we got some ads. We got bills to pay. I'm not anti-ads. I understand they're part of the deal. But here's the one thing on podcast. You want to skip an ad? You can press fast forward. For those of us that are watching the golf live, we have no choice. The other thing, you don't have to listen to my podcast. You can listen to someone else. Any podcast worth their salt got some ads. This is a business. It's free, right? Well, for golf, for example, Peacock hosted, which I understand. If I owned rights to a live sport and I had a subscription business, I would try to drive you to that subscription business through my sport. ESPN Plus does it, right? With UFC and golf. Yet when I watch ESPN Plus for the PGA Tour, I don't have to watch ads. Why? Because I pay ESPN Plus $99 a year. So I'm watching the Peacock, and I'm paying $10.99 a month or whatever. My girlfriend is because she has Comcast. And I'm watching, and there are just nonstop ads on Peacock. You double dipping motherfuckers. Screw you. Like, what are we doing? The commercial load was atrocious. It was overwhelming. You can't double dip on the playing through. So basically you show an ad and show the guys that they continue to play. But when that ends, then to just go to commercial, it's just an all-time FU. It really is. And a lot of their commercials were promotion for their own shows. So clearly, what does that mean? They didn't get the ad sold. So they're basically just using that to promote, which I understand. You guys run a business. We promote Draymond show or Sherman show or Collins show. It's called cross-promotion. But to do it over and over and over again. Like, I got news for you. I'm 38 years old. I'm not watching any of your shows, NBC. Besides Sunday Night Football, you never get my eyeballs. I don't give a shit what you put on television as I'm watching the U.S. Open. I'm never coming. And deep down, you know that. So just show me the golf. And I also understand that golf is more difficult to show than football, right? Because they would never miss a snap. Patriots, Chiefs. Well, on Saturday, the final group was teeing off, Clark and Fowler. And they come back from break, and the first thing I think Dan Hicks says is, apologize, technical difficulties. We just missed Wyndham's shot. It's right down the middle in the fairway. Can you imagine them coming back from break? It's like Patrick Mahomes just threw an interception to incredible interception by Joey Bosa, picked him off at the line of scrimmage. Sorry we missed that. Here's the replay. Like, screw you guys. Be better. This is what you guys do for a business. This is unacceptable. And forever, the traditional media outlets have been able to do whatever they want because they had us by the balls, but they're going to die a slow death. They just will, especially in golf. They got Piff behind them now. You got to answer to Yoster. That should not be tolerated. Take your, I've been saying this forever. The game's changing. Put it on YouTube TV. And when I say YouTube TV, just put it on YouTube. No commercials. Pretty easy to do. If you don't, do you need NBC's money? If they're going to pay $40 million a year, just have Yoster fund it. Throw it on YouTube. I'd be cool with that. And let NBC simulcast. Zero ads. I know I'm being a little unrealistic, but that was just the commercial load. Paul Azinger feels like a nice guy. He's terrible. He really is. He's got some Nick Faldo vibes. Feels a little out of it. He really does. And I'm a big believer that I think it's kind of overrated. Like, listen, I talk for a living. I didn't play in the NFL. I think I can talk football against fucking anybody. And, you know, our listenership shows that, right? I don't think you need Nick Faldo to be the lead guy just because he has 6 majors if he's not any good. Just because Paul Azinger has hosted, been a Ryder Cup captain and successful PGA Tour. If he's not any good, I don't care. Trevor Immelman won a major, but if he hadn't, he'd still be way better than those guys. Like, yeah, I guess, you need some credibility. Do you? Like, Smiley Kaufman never won a major. I can guarantee you this. He'd be better than Paul Azinger. Paul Azinger kept saying things like, that's not going to roll back. That's just the wrong side. And then it would just roll back and be 5 feet. Like, Paul, have you walked these greens? Have you put in the time? Because that was a big knock on Nick Faldo. Never was out on the range. Never walked the course. He just relied on, I played this, for 30 straight years. Well, you haven't played it for the last 15. And some of your comments do not add up. That's what I felt like I was watching today. It just was not good. It was really, really poor. And I think a lot of people in the media are going to beat it up. And I think sometimes there can be a group think. I think it's easy for everyone to pile on. I think everything that everyone says is justified. I think NBC threw an all-time middle finger to us, the consumer, to us, the fans. They hate us. There's no other way to justify or even put into reality what we all just witnessed for the last 4 days. That they do not give a flying you-know-what about any of us. Because that was a disgrace. I mean, it really was. I can't believe how terrible that broadcast was. It was, they would never in a million, people would get fired left and right if they did that to the National Football League. And I understand the PGA Tour at the NFL, but don't you just treat your operation? Don't you have some standards? Don't you have, like, this is a big deal? I understand, 20 million people ain't watching, but still 5, 6, 7, 4, whatever. This is still on your main channel for back-to-back days, really 4 straight days. And that's what you do? Be better, guys. Be better. Have a good week. Happy Father's Day, everybody.